Y'all, we live in difficult times. There's war, political unrest, the pandemic, poverty, families being torn, communities ripped by gun violence and people dying every day. Police, injustice, it's all bringing so much pain. But y'all, we can look inside our minds and we can understand who we are, become better, and do this thing like we've never done it before. But it all starts with our mental health, and I know we can do it. I believe in you because I believe in me, and I believe in us. Hello, and thank you for joining in for another episode of Therapy is Life, where thinking, feeling, and experiencing well-being is what we do. I have Maal G and BK Watts with me, and today we are celebrating International Women's History Month.
Absolutely.
What y'all think we living in some trying times today, fellas?
Oh, absolutely.
Is water wet? You know what I'm saying? Absolutely, man.
No,
You
it's
know what I'm
not.
saying?
Listen, that's a whole
Water's
other
not
conversation.
wet.
Water is not wet.
Oh, my mom, I had this debate with my daughter all the time, man. But yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Water is not wet.
No. Like, just like fire ain't burnt. You know what I'm saying? It burns. And water wets. You feel me?
Water wets.
Okay.
Okay.
Jugs, man, I know.
Message.
Message. Well, with that being said, fellas, I want to start with this message from Maya Angelou. You know, one of our ancestors now.
Yes.
But while she was here, and she gave us so much. And, you know, I like to call it ancestral knowledge. Let me read this. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. People know themselves much better than you do. That's why it is important to stop expecting them to be something other than who they are. And today I would like to take for a short subject. People know themselves better than you.
Profound.
Coming from the chapter and verse of Maya Angelou.
Facts. Like, come on, bro.
We not in church. Oh,
The poet.
what'd you say? Yes, poet.
The poet.
Yeah, how do you think, before we get deep into this, you know, have you read some of her stuff over the years?
Yes.
I mean, how do you think she has inspired or influenced you? Just the woman herself.
Man, Maya Angelou, man, she's just such a profound, thought-provocative speaker, man. And, you know, it's sometimes the subtleties in her words. It's not even like the complexity sometimes. It's just the nuance of how she can just speak directly, but really speak in so many layers through simple words, man. So it's, you know, she is definitely, you know, influenced me as an artist, as a speaker, as a MC. You know, just her ways of putting words together that makes you think in layers. And you know, I have daughters, man, so she's definitely been one of the people who, as far as a black woman of intelligence and profound wisdom, man, that I make sure that I expose them to. My mother was an educator, so she made sure that she exposed me to like poetry and, you know, people like Langston Hughes, Nika Giovanni. But you know, Maya Angelou was definitely one of those ones who, you know, they exposed her material to me, you know, at a young age. And so that quote right there, that's one of the ones that my father used to always drill me with, you know, and just kind of in educating me about, you know, just human experience and dealing with people. So yeah, she's definitely one of those ancestors now that I've looked up to throughout the years.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, like it's joints like that are within her writing. for me, when I was writing, it gave me the subtle difference between being able to be complex and metaphorical, and at the same time also being able to be just simple, strip, bare bones down and direct. And both of them are able to be dope. When I first started writing, and I was first rapping, it was like I'm trying to come up with the craziest, like wow, this metaphorical, and then you hear something like that, and it's just like, hey, he said he was that, believe it, and people be like, oh, and it's like, damn. So it can be that simple.
Yep.
Like, okay, cool. But it's like it can be that simple, but it gotta be impactful. It gotta hit. So then it's like, all right, cool. You start to think different ways, and so the fact that she was just it seemed so effortless in her ability to switch it off and on. You know what I'm saying? And, I know why the cage bird sings, and I'm like, what the hell is you talking about? So then it's like, oh, okay, well I can. All right, you can take something and relate. Take this one thing and relate this to
apply it.
You know what I'm saying?
Right,
apply
right.
It. That right there, like creativity in the because I was exposed to that more so than I was, even rap that was doing that, in different ways until later on. Yeah. I didn't really start to get into music like hip hop like that in lyricism until like early 2000s. So before that, I had all kind of different, influences on myself. It was different. The way that, just wasn't really there. I wasn't looking at it like that. Music was just music. I didn't go look to it for messages necessarily. Because we all know that era, that 90s into the 2000s, like the message that used to be there at the beginning of hip hop wasn't quite there no more. It was really mostly just kicking it.
Right.
So, yeah.
Party rap.
Right. Yeah. So Maya definitely, when I started to get into writing, showed me I can write different ways and be able to, get points across and be impactful.
Yeah. As a therapist, man, listen, this idea, this concept, I use it a lot in therapy. Use these words because I think it speaks to human nature and who we are. We could talk about it on a personal level, your colleagues at work. We could talk about it with your friends. We could talk about it with your crew, if you want to say it like that. We could talk about it with your family, your wives, your husbands. And I think a lot of times when people have these kind of issues, we don't necessarily believe that they are where they are. And today, this was such wisdom. And we always trying to come up with new stuff as human beings, and we trying to think about new ways of looking at things. But to your point, BK Watts, it's like understanding like these simple things. We try to make it hard, but these simple things, as I heard somebody say one time, never underestimate the magnificence which is found in simplicity. So it's like you think about those things, these simple things, and they like bedrocks for how we should live.
Right.
But I'm curious today, guys. I have some points here. Why do you think people have a hard time seeing things as they really are, accepting it? Why do you think we want to make things something different? Is, one of my first things that came up to me was people want to maintain relationships. What's your thoughts on that? People want to maintain relationships.
Well, one thing related to the first thing you said, like, why do people strive for almost somebody to adapt to their comfort level, right? That's how I kind of look at that. Like, it's comfortability, right? What feels the most comfortable when you have something that's in your atmosphere that's kind of like opposing your human behavior. It challenges you. It makes you have to adapt. It makes you have to just be able to coexist with something, even if it's not the same like-minded or same exact nature as yours, right? So I think, and that's kind of just a human nature thing. I think that's why I heard one person say human beings are tribal by nature. So we adapt to like-minded people, right? We adapt to people who like the same music as us, like the same, style as us, like the same similarities, right? So when you're around that difference, it's kind of like a level of uncomfort because it's like I'd rather you be more like me than me be more like you or us coexist for our differences. So I think you know, like going back to her statement, it's like, you know, you got to accept people for who they are. And as much as you want them to change and be more like you, that might happen over time. But what does the old saying go? Birds of a feather flock together, right? You
Right,
usually
exactly.
be around people who, but if I'm around you long enough, I might pick up some of your characteristics just from being around you, and seeing, okay, that's cool, that works. I like his necklace, you know what I'm saying? I might get me a necklace like that. That's cool. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh, for
Like
sure.
things that you can see that works for somebody, you might pick up that as a habit or a trait, but it's not gonna happen instantaneously. You know
Right.
what I
I know
mean?
what you mean.
And I think that's the challenge sometimes where people just they like that comfort of man, it's more comfortable for us to like the same things than us to be opposed.
Right. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that sometimes that in these situations that we have experiences with people where we've gotten used to them being a certain way or we used to having them around and maybe they've demonstrated some similarities and in those areas where we agree, we like, okay, we agree, but then when we come across this thing that says they're really adversarial to us, then we like, nah, because we agree in these ways. So we just kind of keep going on with the situation or experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of more so avoid those times when you avoid those conversations, you avoid those moments, so you kind of stay away from that instead of maybe confronting that and then having the conversation of why you feel like that. It causes where you got to have that what they call the crucial conversation sometimes. You got to be able to agree to disagree sometimes,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's like also like what society says be making us feel certain ways too. Like if you grow up and you looking at sitcoms and you see parents portrayed a certain way on TV, then you almost kind of expect that from your own. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yo, like why ain't you being like that? Because to my knowledge, this is how it's supposed to go. And you think that your ideological thinking should apply to everybody,
Right.
and it doesn't necessarily. It's like, damn, like, well, this father was on TV like this, and this father was on TV like this, and I don't even be seeing you, dog. Well, like, what's going on? How come you not Carl Winslow? What's happening? You know what I'm saying? It's that, like you said, it's that to what's in your mind, and then society influences that too, and tells you how people should be, and then it makes you want to have people be that. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So look, check this out. Check this out. You gotta say that. So I'm gonna take this softly. So you hear somebody say something that's real outlandish or crazy. When you hear it, you're like, oh no, they ain't gonna do that. Like because you thinking they wouldn't be this way or they wouldn't act in this matter, and then they actually do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They actually do it. You're like, nah, it couldn't be that bad. It can't be that serious. but go ahead.
But like to his earlier point, I think it's connected to like life experiences, right? Like, and every aspect of our life experiences shape us. So
Right.
I'm not there for every TV show that you watched, every music that you listen to, your atmosphere of growing up, right? Like, my father was a present father, but his father wasn't there. So, everything that, and not that he wasn't there, he wasn't in the house. He had a relationship with him. It wasn't like he was totally non-existent, but his experience of being a father was just from what he saw, not necessarily from what he experienced. So how he raised me was off of, examples of what either he wanted to be as a father or what he saw as a father was the right way.
Right.
Yeah.
Where my experience was I had a present father, so I can raise my kids with more so a atmosphere of being there. Not saying that everything I do is perfect or everything he did was perfect, but I can also take examples of things that I see as a positive father and things that works, and then things that worked in mine, and then things that maybe didn't work in mine. So it's like you could want somebody to be what you see, but it might be off of their experience of what it was to have a father, and what they know to be a father.
Right. Hey, to y'all points, man. I oftentimes tell my son this, my kids, because somebody said it to me, but they said it in a different way. But what I tell my kids, listen, you are a very trusting person because you grew up in a trusting environment. But that doesn't mean that you can trust everybody or give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes people will lie to you right off the rip. They don't care about being honest.
That's right.
They will lie in your face. As the song says, smiling faces tell lies. But because you're an honest person, you'll try to give them the benefit of the doubt. And the problem with the benefit of the doubt is this. Oftentimes you pay the cost for the doubt, or you give them the benefits, but you pay the cost because they lying to you. But because you trust in, you try to, okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm experiencing that right now with raising my oldest. She's in college, and I feel like she takes on, and it's from her life experiences right now. Now she's in college and she's away from us, and she's experiencing life on her own terms a little bit. But I think she's learning that she can't take every relationship, like, to your point, trusting everybody that she meets on the same level of the atmosphere that we put her around, where we kind of molded the atmosphere that she was around, and molded the people that she would be exposed to. So now you're away from it, so you're being able to meet all types of people, and you can't have that same radar of just openness or trust, or thinking you could talk to people in the same manner as you do people who know you or who love you. You have to more so put a guard up and allow yourself to understand who people are before you give them that space.
Right, exactly.
Before you give them that same comfort level that you would somebody who knows you, who loves you, who you can trust.
Right.
You got to be able to read the room a little bit.
Right.
Before you can give them that green light.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's tough. Like you don't. It's not the same as it used to be. Like things are different, and it's difficult as parents because like times change. So we can only give them we can only guide them based on our experiences and things that come prior. But it's always that element of things that we don't even understand based on what's changing because we're not a part of that generation in that time.
Facts.
To where it's difficult to where we can give them as much as possible. At the same time, I do hate the idea of feeling like you gotta dump a bunch of negativity onto your kids, but you also want to try to shield them as much as possible. But like I said, it's always gonna be those elements of things that's just different with the kids because I'm finally far enough removed from the kids to be able to see it, and it's just like hearing how they talk and interacting with them or going into the schools. It's just like, yo, these are different little people. This ain't how it was when I was this age, not even close. Because they got so much access, and so much access to so much information. They are in completely different headspaces at the same age that when I was their age. But they're in a completely different headspace with all this access, all this information, but without the emotional nor mental capacity and maturity to be able to really understand everything that they have at their fingertips. So it's tough.
Right. To your point, like the social media element alone, like nowadays people are meeting people for the first time on social media, right? And you look at their profile, you look at what they post, and try to gauge that this is what type of person they are off of what they're posting.
Right.
But 9 times out of 10, that's not even really who they truly are. So that's an element of maybe what they want to expose to you. but they're not even being able to have that in person engagement as much anymore to really learn who that person is in the flesh, more so than in what they get exposed to and what people want to be promoted as for themselves nowadays. So it's just like layers of. I think it's a layer of manipulation that you got to move through before you can really understand who people truly are.
Yeah, because in social media, how often do people really authentically present their true selves? I just think that's so interesting. What I realize is rarely do people do that. And sometimes people are trying so hard to manifest we might call it reactive formation in psychodynamic theory. There's this idea of feeling like, okay, I feel sad, but I'm gonna project happiness out there. I'm gonna let everybody see that I'm happy. And so I'll use social media as a place to do that. But really I'm miserable. And I think that, confident people who feel at peace with themselves might be less likely to try to send a whole lot of messages out there. But people that's struggling,
Want people to perceive them as this confident individual
visual that's
all
got
the time.
everything all together and stuff like that.
No, that's real.
That's real. Hey, so I think so much of what I'm hearing in this particular part of the discussion, this question, is the fact that we learn things a certain way and we see people the way we see the world. If we come from a trusted environment, we see the world to be the other people. When they say or do things, we want to perceive or think that they're that same way, and we don't always look at people when they do things that we don't understand. We don't always look at people the way they actually are, but we kind of project how we are off on them.
Yeah.
And so that can happen in a good and negative way. The idea of projection. If I'm angry, I put it off on everybody else as being angry. But the same thing, if I'm happy, I can put everybody else as being.
Man, listen, as a barber, man, when I was younger, I used to get in a lot of arguments and debates with people, and a lot more arguments because I wanted people to more so agree with me. You know what I'm saying? In barbershop debates and stuff like that, I would argue points and argue theories or argue just my ideas with people, and to the point where I thought I was going to eventually win them over in that. And it really just used to be a treadmill race, man. And I would be exhausted at the end of it because it's like 9 times out of 10, you're not going to win people over, man. And some people even put up more of a fight to hold up their ground on with their thoughts or their opinions. And so I had to progress in learning that after I put my thoughts out there and they put their thoughts out there, you can argue with people for sport if you want to, you know what I'm saying? But 9 times out of 10, they gonna hold their ground.
Right. And that leads us to the second thing about people, uncomfortable with conflict. A lot of reasons why we don't deal with, or when we see people and we try to embrace them, and when we don't want to have that conflict, we don't want to have that disagreement, we don't want to be in that struggle, so we kind of stay right there because we don't want to argue, we don't want to fight. My thought is, question with that is, it makes sense that we don't always want to fight, but how do you know when it's necessary?
I'll say, in my opinion, the necessary is, for me, it starts with family. Those are the necessary spaces. Like, outside of family, like, those are secondary depending on how important that relationship is. Like, if I got to work with you, or if you're going to be in my daily atmosphere, those are more so people than I feel like it's worth the conversation. But it starts with family, for me, like my wife, right? Like, if me and my wife are at odds in an idea or opinion, to me, that's worth the conversation. That's worth me taking the time to go ahead and go through the uncomfortable stage of, the conflict, us sitting down. And what I've learned with that for sure is, it can't be when we in high emotion, like when we're both angry, you know.
Right.
We both angry. We've learned to, all right, put it on the shelf, pause, and find a more calm meeting ground to have the conversation. But when we at odds and the temperatures is high, you know what I'm saying, and we trying to get them points across, my wife is strong-minded, and I am too. You know what I mean? So we gonna go back and forth on our opinions, and it's really like once again that treadmill race. We ain't getting nowhere because she gonna hold her ground, and I'm gonna hold mine. But when we more so can calm the moment down and keep our tone down and be able to discuss it, you know, I think that's where it's worth the time. And so when you pose the question or the topic of discussion, I thought more so primarily about family in these matters because that's where it holds more importance. Outside of my family, like I said, if I don't work with you on a daily basis or you influence my atmosphere, I choose to not even waste my energy sometimes on dealing with outside people like that because people gonna hold their ground and you gonna be in your space and I'm gonna be in mine. As long as you ain't influencing my personal world, I'm not even gonna waste my breath on it sometimes with these people, man, because people just gonna be people. But if it's my family first and it's somebody who's in my, and sometimes even with family, you know what I'm saying? You got them distance. I got into an argument last week with my cousin, man, over something, man, that I felt like I was totally right on. And he thought he was right on. And I could see like, hey, man, you going to be stuck on stupid with your ideas, you know what I mean? And so I choose to like put you over there on the shelf until you come back to your senses because I'm not about to waste my breath on it. You know, so that's my thoughts, man. Family first on that.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to say that with conflict, I think is important to understand that conflict is necessary for things to change or to improve. You can't possibly. So we have to learn to be comfortable with conflict. And one of the things I try to encourage people to see, number one, you're talking about outside of the family. Does it outside of the family necessary or not? Does it affect where you sleep? Does it affect where you eat? Does it affect the car you drive? Does it affect the clothes you wear? Does it affect your overall life or well-being?
Yeah.
Is it just gossip? Maybe I don't need to go and put out that fire because it's not relevant. But then there's other conflict that we could be uncomfortable with, but we need to have, like with our family, with our loved ones, because we don't want to live in a space where we can't be comfortable because of something somebody's doing that's really bothering us, but we just kind of throwing it away, because eventually that issue is going to become a bigger problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Hey, therapy is life, people.
But look, with that being said, the next one is belief that people can change. Now, look, before we get into this, I'm gonna tell you a little bit of a story, right? Because it kind of goes into your last point about family. So, you know, I'm gonna say I had this friend, and he met this gorgeous girl, man. Right? She was one of them type, real smart, she articulate, just all those things.
Checked all the boxes.
Checks all the boxes. And, he bringing her around, and, he is a very successful, brother and everything. And, so I meet this girl, and she's like, hey, okay, cool. And they doing their thing. And, he got our house in a nice suburb community, and all this, right? They together. One day, he calls me all distraught, and he says, gee, man, I gotta go. So he comes and he stays with me for a while. This is back in my single days.
Okay.
He comes and stays with me for a while. Come to find out, they had a child. They was engaged. They had a little tussle because she was inebriated and tried to leave the house with the baby. He tried to stop her. and everything. And in trying to stop her, man, they had a disagreement. She ends up calling the police,
Oh boy.
pressing charges on him. Now, here's this professional black man dealing with the legal system, and it kind of barrels on. Even though the police report didn't demonstrate anything that he did particularly wrong, they still end up being charged with something, and then it, of course, was on his record and blase. But in talking to him, and I think this is a relevant story, he knew she had a problem with drinking very early on,
Yeah.
but he thought he could change her.
Yeah.
What is it about us that you think that is going on with us? Why do you think we often feel like we can change people?
I feel like we stupid and don't consider the fact that there's 8 billion people on the planet. So whoever you having an issue with can be replaced.
Ooh.
It's like a guaranteed fact that they can be replaced. It might be a little frustrating. It might take you some time to replace that person. That can be friend, spouse, whatever. It's 8 billion of us. In your lifetime, you won't meet 1% of the world, fam. Go find somebody else. It's all right. Like, genuinely, just go find somebody else. And we don't, and people don't think that. People, we get emotionally attached, we get emotionally invested, we connect ourselves to things and then lock into it and then just can't seem to let go. And that is an issue. There are some people who, I think, you know, there is definitely unhealthy detachment where people just so quick to just not like that, but it's like when you got somebody who got issues, when you got somebody who got problems, you trying to fix people that's your job. You know what I'm saying? Like, not mine. That is not my job. You know what I'm saying? You help guide them to getting their head together. That's not what I do. I press the buttons. I make sure that we look good here on Therapy is Life. We're thinking, feeling, experience, well-being is what we do. You know what I'm saying? That's my job. Not
Advertisement,
right? Not
on screen.
You feel me? Not uncrazying you, lady. That's not what I get paid to do. So no, it's like we don't.
That's why he's here.
Right. So we attach to things and to people, and then we hold on to them, and we can't look past what like I said, our ideological viewpoint is. We can't look past that. It's like, all right, y'all go ahead with that. Not me though. I be gone. I'll put you, like you said with your cut. You're on the shelf. You cool over there, and I'm gonna be over here, and that's how we have to be able to detach from things, especially when they unhealthy. You know what I mean? Because somebody else being unhealthy and not having they self together will then trickle into your life and make what could be healthy and cool toe up too.
Yeah.
No, man, like, man, to both of y'all points, man, you know, and I put my story out there somewhat, man, but, you know, the relationship that I was with prior to my wife, and this was a young man, fresh from being a teenager, touching, you know, young adulthood. I was with this young lady, and you know, we were cool. You know, we started dating, and that's why I always stress, man. You know, especially to the young people, man, don't try to be so committed so young, because you still got so much to learn about life in general. You know, learn about yourself first before you be trying to like be all locked into a relationship. But I was with this young lady, man. We was together for about a year or so, and you know, there was elements of her, you know, that made me want to be in a relationship with her, and things that kind of kept us together for a minute. But she was so toxic. She always liked to argue and fuss, and it was like she just was always seeming like she was looking for the debate. She was looking for the argument for real. And like to the point where, you know, men have those triggers. Men have those things where it's like, is you trying to get me to smack you or something like that? Like, you coming at me disrespectful right now. Like, you dogging me. And I've never, to put on record, never been that type of guy, never hit my wife. Now, I'm not abusive. I don't agree with that at all. But this girl was trying to take me there. You know what I'm saying? And it got to a point with that relationship where I almost felt like trapped in the relationship, because I felt like a level of like emotional attachment, but also like I felt like, man, I was like being a savior to this girl for a second, man. Like I was her, I was helping her not only financially somewhat, but just her escape from her world.
Right,
And
right.
then I was understanding, you know, from this is why you got to see how people are raised.
Mm-hmm.
Her mama was stayed in a bunch of abusive relationships and was in and out of relationships all the time, this, that, and the third. And I'm thinking like that's what she got from her as far as what it is for somebody to love you. They got to be arguing with you all the time, or this is just what she was exposed to. And I'll never forget, man, when my pops told me after just telling him about this difficult relationship, he was like, if somebody takes you to that point, get far away from them because, if they're trying to always fuss and fight and this and the third, who knows, it could eventually climax to that point where something pops off and then boom, now you in trouble.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I just felt an emotional attachment to that relationship for the longest where I felt like I was being this girl's savior. And so it was hard for me to leave that toxic thing. But eventually I finally did. And then I found my wife, which was a totally opposite vibe of that, where I never had to go through that always fussing and fighting. So to your point, it's like it's so many different options out here, and there's a better option out here for you if you allow yourself to get away from the toxic and stop thinking you could change somebody, just from how you are, because sometimes people are how they are from their life experiences.
Right. You know what? And y'all make some really good points. It's number one, I think it's important that we do take time to understand and become self-aware, because if we're not self-aware, it's very difficult to find a quality relationship because you don't know yourself. You don't know where you coming from, what you like, what you don't like. Because that helps you better relate with other people, because you might think somebody that's very opposite from you might be cool, but in the long run, you might realize that, you know what, we not even on the same page or in the same stratosphere about important things. And so now you find yourself in situations where you have to compromise more, and that becomes wear and tear, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's another biological connection when you start being engaged, getting emotionally, and dealing with someone, getting intimately involved with them. You do become attached to them. Early on in relationships, I think this idea of physical attraction, it pulls us in, and we get pulled in, and a lot of times we ignore things that we see to be problems.
Yep.
We like, oh, it's gonna be all right, or we can change it. We like, oh, that's gonna be cool, that's gonna be all right. Maybe if I'm a certain way, she'll be a certain way. Maybe he's a certain way. Then, if he's a certain way, then if I'm a certain way, then she'll be a certain way. But I oftentimes hear women talk about this. I don't hear men say this as much, but I hear women talk about this a lot, about men being projects. I think he's a good project.
That is more, yeah.
Count me out. And the crazy thing about it is like we the builders and construction and blah blah blah, but we do not be like, yeah, bro, I'm gonna build her up and put her together.
Yeah,
it's
right.
not what we do.
Nah.
No.
Yeah.
All right. I'm cool, especially because as men, we ain't reading the instruction books, and it definitely ain't no instruction book to the women. I'm good. Count me all the way out, bro.
Women are way more complex than men in their emotional state. So I think it's hard for us to even, as long as they cover the basics, we're good with that, at initiation. But women, they feel like because we're more simple, but we still have layers to us as well. They feel like the wrong things, they'll tweak that, they'll fix that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of understanding it's still certain layers to us as well. And if it displays from the gate, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be a hard task to fix that. You know what I mean? Unless that person is a willing participant.
Yeah. And a lot of times people don't even see or think their behaviors are problems. They just that because they've worked in that space for a long time. It seems normal. It seems functional for them. Even though it might be causing all these stink bombs all over the place.
Right.
They like, well, I don't stink. My stuff don't stink. What are you talking about? But yet, don't you see these patterns of stink bombs is going on? But they don't see it.
Yeah.
And like I said, the idea of being self-aware, we get attached to people, and then we start justifying their behaviors, which goes to the next point of rationalizing people's behaviors, making excuses for it.
You know, I don't be with that either. Like, I mean, people have experiences that do lead to them acting and reacting to certain ways. People have traumas. They can be triggered by them. All these TikTok words, shit. You know, it's like, oh, I'm triggered by that. Like, all right, whatever. Like, I guess, but at the same time, I feel like people often take those little buzzwords and then they use those things as excuses to just wild out. And it's just like, nah, I ain't with it. You know what I'm saying? You got to count me all the way out on that too. It's like, no, like, oh, well, I socked you in the mouth because no. I'm a dude and you a lady and you just jabbed me and I'm not going to jab you back, but I got to get somewhere far, far, far away from you because I would like to continue to be on this side of prison. You know what I mean? People will use BS excuses and reasoning to justify things that they know are wrong. Because my thing is, if somebody can sit and tell you, well, I did that because of this situational trauma thing that happened to me, that means you are fully aware, and you know that you knew that you was ready to use that, load it up as an excuse to try to justify your action. That means you know you wrong. And that means it almost make those actions feel premeditated.
Let me ask you a question. Is there a difference between somebody who says those things, but and says, look, here we go with you, says, I'm sorry, you know, I realized my behavior was wrong, and they have a plan to move differently versus somebody who just comes out with an excuse? Do you think there's a difference between those two?
It's definitely a difference. Because it's like, all right, we can have a conversation. I'm with having a conversation with somebody, and we can talk about it. Hey, look, this is how I felt about what you did or how you acted or whatever the case may be. This went wrong. Okay, cool. I feel my bad because X, Y, Z, and this is how I will, going forward. Like they say, the best apology is change behavior.
Right.
So it's like if I could physically see that happening, I see you actually putting in the effort to make a change, do something different, then cool. If I don't, and things continue to be the exact same way, that's when it's like, all right, I got to get up out of here.
Yeah, because I feel like a self-aware person can come to you and know they stressed out, going through things, and they may have this more reactive behavior because they're going through stuff, and they might like, my fault, man. I was stressed out. I was going through something. I remember one day I was at the Shore Center. It was like around 6 o'clock, and the building would close at 6 o'clock on a Friday. And the janitor comes knocking on my door real hard, yelling and screaming, about how it's time to go and get out the building. You still in there with a client, Mcgee? And I'm sitting there with my client, and I'm like, what? I can't believe he like this. And I got angry. So I went to the door, ran out the door looking for him. Like, where you at? All right, I'm not encouraging this behavior at home, but I got angry. So for a long time, I didn't see him. And then one day he comes to me, he says, I'm sorry, Gerald. I didn't like the way I handled myself that day. He said, I had a really bad toothache and it was really kicking my butt, and I just came at you the wrong way. Yeah. I genuinely saw him as being sincere.
That's respect. That
was respectful. But there's some people who automatically will go to the blame game. Oh.
And you can read those type of people, like you said, like it's one thing when, and I hate that part too, when people use those, I got emotional trauma, or I deal with anxiety, or these words that give them an out. But
right.
It's like, if you don't put in the work, and if I don't see it, and if you habitually doing this to me,
right.
Then it's like, now it's like I'm the fool if I keep on believing you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so I'm about, if this is what your issue is, this is your trauma, okay, and you apologize, and then boom, I see you putting in the work. I see you start to talk to a therapist and try to work through these issues. Boom, okay, now I can give you that grace. But I'm a fool if you keep on hurting me and stabbing me, and then you using these words as your out. And then now I'm just supposed to be your doormat on that.
Yeah. Particularly when you think about abusive relationships, verbally abusive relationships, which is the most destructive form of abuse. So we can kill people with words. That's the first murder right there, with words, right? And then you talk about the physical abuse part of it, or people neglecting you, or neglecting your well-being, or trying to socially, emotionally isolate you. Though in those situations, and then people tell you, "Oh, I was stressed out, or I was going through something, or making feel, oh, my mama did this, or my daddy did this," and all these different things. They understand it, to your point, but they're not trying to do anything to work on it. But after they do these things, they'll go through a honeymoon period where they'll treat you really nice.
Right. Yep.
They'll honeymoon you, and then you'll start feeling like, oh, they tried rationalizing it. Yeah, they was stressed out, or they were just going through something. And so now you hook back in, and then they'll fall back into, eventually stress will build up, and they'll fall back into that same old behavior.
Yep.
I mean that's human nature too, though.
Tell them that is human nature.
Yeah, like it definitely is. Because I mean, like we know, you can be somebody who was an alcoholic and get away from the bottle, but you got those people who, after they have completely stopped drinking, they won't even take a taste or a sip of anything, because they feel like immediately once they do, they gon'
Fall right back.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, I done got my health together, and now I done lost a bunch of weight, and I'm in good shape. And those people just and they won't touch a cheat day, because they know if they do, they gonna start to, all right, man, well, I got 2 cheat days because I ain't gained no weight off that one, and then all of a sudden they back eating, you know what I'm saying, Doritos every day. So I understand that it's cool when you encounter somebody who has enough self-awareness, like you said, to understand who they are, to understand that they may have an addictive nature, to understand that they may easily slip out of positive things into negative things, and know that about themselves, and therefore say, I'm just gonna completely abstain. You know what I'm saying? Or I'll stay away from these different types of things.
Yeah, and you know what? The thing about self-awareness, which is important in this situation, is when you are self-aware, you are better at setting boundaries. Because I can be empathetic. Empathy, show compassion and concern for feelings and emotions of other people. If I could say I come from a trusting background, I might want to trust people, but as we grow up, we learn that everybody is not trustworthy. Mm-hmm. But also, if you was on the traumatized side of things, I see this a lot where people have been traumatized and they have an empathetic sense towards people. And because they were traumatized and they went through things, they'll be sympathetic to people that they see are hurt or going through things, to the point that those people might be taken advantage of also, because they're trying to do that. But what we have to do is we have to be really self-aware and really try to understand who is in front of us for who they are. Because when I'm self-aware, and I know me and I know my strengths and weaknesses, I know where I'm vulnerable, right? Mm-hmm. And also, but when you're also self-aware, it helps you be more in tune to people, and if they're really genuine, if they're really about the right things. I think we have to be able to trust our gut, because sometimes, and I ain't talking about our traumatized gut, because sometimes that's overly sensitive, because we'll be seeing a snake when it's a water hose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we always fall into that trauma. But the idea of just being able to step back and look at things, evaluate what's in front of us, so we don't have to fall into these crazy patterns. Because we tend to fall into patterns because we don't take time to really evaluate who, what, when, where, how. Because everybody got a story, but are we taking time to understand what that story is? Yeah. And so we get in these places over and over again, because a lot of times when we get in places, we get in spaces because we're hurt and we're trying to deal with our own hurt. So without really doing self-evaluation and doing some healing, we back out into the world. So we find ourselves back in these same crazy situations with people who are different but are very similar internally to the people that we was around before. And then they do the same thing to us. And then we like, why it keep happening to me?
Yeah.
Heck, look, y'all, throw this out here right quick. We ain't got to get all off into this. But listen, I honestly feel that America was traumatized by COVID, and we never really healed from it. And where we at right now is a result of not healing.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely. I mean, that was one of the things that, one of the presidential candidates who was trying to run, can't remember exactly what the guy's name was, but that was one of his agendas that I felt like nobody really got behind like that, like they should. Just the trauma healing from this country being shut down for about 2.5 years, and then thinking we were just supposed to open right back up and be back to normal.
Yeah, we never dealt with that. And so you had in 2022, you had all this like, all this inflation and all this stuff like 7.2% inflation, the fentanyl crisis going off the chain, and then you also got all these millions of people dying from COVID, kids at home, we wearing masks all the time. That was traumatic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think we thought like as soon as it was over, we was gonna fall back into this place where like, boom, everything would be good, and like life would go back to being normal, but better than it was before. Mm-hmm. And so when it wasn't like that, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah. And it's like I feel like they don't even want to acknowledge it or address it, because even acknowledging or addressing it for the people who lost loved ones and things like that, like I think it's a total difference from how when 9/11 happened, right? 9/11 happened. That's something that we acknowledge every year when 9/11 comes, and it probably helps the people who are grieving from that deal with that. Just the fact that they acknowledge it and they have a day of reverence related to that. No matter how you think about the conspiracy of that, but it's just the people who did lose loved ones and
exactly
the loss that was had there. We have a day that we can talk about it and maybe heal from that. But this is just like, we ain't even gonna talk about it. We just gonna keep it moving. You know what I'm saying? Act like it never happened and just try to press past it.
Right. And then we put it on singular people to make everything, fix everything. And in reality, it's so nuanced and complicated that you can't really fix it like that. But there's all this hysteria. And then all it does is just reinforce us going back into more bad decisions. And now look where we at.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's just it's so unfortunate. But my point for bringing that up is that's why it's important for us as individuals to be really self-aware, because that's how you get into stuff and where you don't see people as they are, because we don't deal with ourselves like we need to. So then we get into these bad situations and trying to be empathetic or trying to, feel better, but we don't really evaluate ourselves enough, and everything. And it can cause some cognitive dissonance, which, I talked about that. And that's really, there's a confusion between how you feel in one space and another space in your life. So I can say it like this: like you the things you learned from your parents and your beliefs, your attitudes. The things you imagine as a child, but then there's these things you've learned as a rational adult. And when there's confusion between what you've learned as a rational adult, like this is America, but this is ideally what I think America is, and this is what I actually have experienced. Mm-hmm. I went to church. This is what I was taught in church about people, but this is how people really are. So that confusion. All right. So I see people. I see how they are, but I also have this compassion towards people, or this empathy towards people. And so I'm supposed to be a helper. I'm supposed to take care of people and everything. Understand at the same time, you can never help people more than they're willing to help themselves.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
That's the key point right there. That's the key point that you had to realize, because as much as you want to change people, right, it's just like, I got a homie, man, and man, I know me and him that had deep conversations about him getting away from alcoholism and the gifts that he has that he can possess, and he realizes it too, but he's not willing to put in the change for that, like for real, the change for that, for it to manifest. And so as much as I could want that for him, I can't want it for him more than he wanted for himself, or willing to put in the work to make it happen.
Exactly.
You can't. And he got to be tired of being sick and tired, and getting to that point where it's just like, all right, boom, today's the day I'm going to make that change. Exactly. I can't want it for him more than he wanted for himself.
Exactly.
What I mean? So
you can't do it for, one of the things I tell people in therapy, and obviously this is idea that comes from dialectical behavioral therapy, and I think it's in other therapy, models. But the idea of radical acceptance. Listen, before I define that, we could stay just like we are. We can have people in our lives that, or we can have experiences in our lives that's not good for us, and we could decide that we're just gonna deal with them, and however they affect us is however they affect us, right? We could decide to leave those experiences alone, and that may work for us. It may help us. We may have to, but there's some situations that we have to deal with that we can't always leave alone, and we have to evaluate what those are. But the other option is radical acceptance. Instead of expecting people to change, we change ourselves in order to deal with them accordingly. So if you're gonna deal with, you have to deal with them. If they have a particular attitude, a way of handling things that don't really work for you, instead of putting yourself in the position to be bamboozled or hurt, you just deal with them, but are dealing with them under the expectations that you can live with.
Facts. Yeah.
I think that's important to understand. There's some things in life you can't change, and we also have to understand that not everybody. I think sometimes when we look at things as good and evil, I think that's just so unrealistic, because in everything in life there's good and bad in it. and we started saying, well, the lesser of two evils or whatever it might be, or people. Sometimes if we understand what they can give and what they can't give us and deal with them just according to that, we won't have to be as disappointed or mad or angry. But if you continue doing the same thing you are doing and you're getting the same results, at the end of the day, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. 3 times the last time. Right. So
That's good.
So we have to understand, like, yeah, you know what? If I'm gonna deal with this person, I'm gonna deal with the situation. How can I change myself to deal with it versus expecting people to change? Because you got more control over you than you got control of other people.
That's real.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I had to shift my relationship with that friend I was saying, like, because every time I would get around him, I'd be frustrated or mad when he would come around me intoxicated. As much as I told him, like, hey, bro, don't come around me and you drunk. You know, if you come into my atmosphere, suppress yourself. But I can't stop him from that. But I had to be like, okay, if you're willing, being myself, willing to spend time around this guy, you got to, one, accept him for who he is, and then maybe limit the time or just limit your own expectations so it doesn't frustrate you.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? I had to stop being upset that he would have a bottle with him when he would come with me. It's like, all right, that's him. I know he's going to have a bottle, so I just got to accept that and know that that's going to be him.
Right,
You know
exactly,
what I mean?
exactly.
Cut that time a little shorter. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Well, man, anything else?
Off the top of the nugget, hey, just make sure that you guys are subscribed to Revolt Podcast Network. Now rebranded as the Revolt Creator Network. We out here in these streets. Stay tapped in, of course, with the good brother
Yes.
here. Licensed, okay, licensed up, experienced up. Gerald Mcgee himself. All right, the therapist out here in these streets. You feel me? Stay tapped in. Stay tuned in. Love, peace, and chicken grease. We appreciate y'all. Follow everybody. I'm BKA Watts. That's better known as We Out Here in These Streets.
And you are?
Maal G, man, and I don't do a lot of, promoting of my businesses on this platform, but I just do want to shout out because I think by the time this airs, it'll be launched. But I'm starting a merch line. It's called Uhuru, and it's Art Equals Freedom. And
Oh, that's what's up.
Yeah, this is my merch line I'm putting out. And Uhuru, for all those who want to know what that means, it's a Swahili word for freedom. And so it's art equals freedom, and it's expression through art and fashion. So you can follow us on social media, spelled just like you see it, Uhuru, and we actually have a website too, uhuru.com. So yeah, look us up.
That's fire. The next time y'all see me, I'm gonna be wearing some of that junk.
You're-
Feel me?
you're out in the
feel
Uhuru.
Yeah,
me.
Uhuru
Yeah.
is Uhuru forever.
The official fashion brand.
Yeah. Look, y'all. Love yourselves. Find value, because it's not what you have; it's how you value yourself. It is the foundation of all things. Love yourself. See your own worth. So everything else in life will only reflect what's already in your heart and mind. Don't forget, like you said, to like us, subscribe, leave your comments, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.